time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
The words were delivered quietly, but their effect was devastating. Prince Harry arrived expecting another tense encounter with his brother. Instead, he discovered that William had made a decision touching something far more personal than titles or protocol. Harry, Meghan, and their children would no longer have unrestricted family access to certain private royal grounds. Within minutes, the conversation collapsed. Harry pushed back his chair, and the Duke walked out before William could finish speaking. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had chosen Windsor because he wanted the message delivered privately, without aides turning a family wound into official language. The private royal grounds at the center of the dispute were not public palace areas or ceremonial spaces. They were family-controlled sections, used for daily life, security, and moments away from public access. That distinction mattered, because the decision did not erase Harry from the family. It changed the terms under which he, Meghan, Prince Archie, and Princess Lilibet could enter those protected areas. Harry heard something very different. The moment his wife and children were named, his anger sharpened. He told William that Archie and Lilibet should never grow up feeling like strangers to places tied to their own family history. The prince tried to explain that future visits could still happen, but only through specific arrangements and prior approval. Harry cut him off. His chair moved back hard against the floor, and he said the restriction felt less like security and more like punishment. William did not follow him when he walked toward the door. That silence carried its own weight. A closed folder remained on the table, containing the access review that had forced the issue into the open. An access review, in simple terms, is an internal check of who may enter protected royal areas and under what conditions. William had studied it long enough to know that this confrontation was coming, and he had already decided that avoiding it would only make the eventual rupture worse. Charles knew the review existed. According to a documented fictional account of the private discussion, the king had been informed that access rules were being reconsidered, but William insisted on delivering the final decision himself. He refused to hide behind palace staff because he understood the emotional cost. Yet Harry left believing his brother had crossed a line. William remained behind, believing the line had been crossed months earlier, and that buried incident was about to explain everything. It began with a visit that should have been completely uneventful and routine. For William and Harry, royal land was never merely land. These were places tied to childhood, grief, privacy, and memories of Diana, spaces where two brothers once escaped the machinery surrounding them. That is why William's restriction cuts so deeply. Harry does not simply hear that a gate has closed. He hears that his branch of the family is being placed outside an emotional boundary that once seemed impossible between Diana's sons. Harry returned to his vehicle, carrying anger that faded almost as quickly as it had erupted. Once the door closed, the fury gave way to silence. He looked back toward the estate and understood what had changed. Private royal grounds were not ceremonial spaces built for crowds or cameras. They were protected family areas where senior royals lived, gathered, and tried to preserve something resembling ordinary life. For Harry, those places carried memories no official title could replace. For William, they had become spaces he felt responsible for protecting. William carried a different burden. His position placed him closer to the machinery of the monarchy, while Harry had built an independent life with Meghan and their children. That contrast mattered, because the brothers were no longer arguing from the same reality. William saw access as responsibility. Harry saw it as belonging. And caught between those ideas were Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, children the future king did not blame for any adult dispute. Meghan heard the details later from Harry privately. She immediately noticed something he had missed in his anger. The wording did not create a total family ban. It ended discretionary access, meaning visits to certain private areas could no longer happen informally and would need to be arranged in advance. She told him the distinction mattered, even if it did not lessen the sting. Harry understood her point, but the emotional wound still remained deep. To him, permission still sounded like distance. Catherine found William alone after the meeting, standing beside an untouched cup of tea. In a documented fictional account of their private exchange, he admitted that keeping the old arrangement informal had become impossible. The Princess of Wales did not answer immediately. She knew he was thinking about Archie and Lilibet alongside security, and she knew that made the decision harder rather than easier. Then, William mentioned the moment that had changed his mind. Catherine's expression shifted. The problem, he said, had not begun with today's argument. It had begun during an earlier family visit, when one unexpected decision turned a private understanding into a test of trust. To understand why William finally drew the line, the story had to return to that afternoon. Every family rupture has a moment people later recognize as the beginning of the end. For William, it came during what was supposed to be a contained family visit months earlier. Nothing dramatic had been scheduled. No ceremony, no press, no public confrontation. Yet before that afternoon ended, an unexpected movement, beyond an agreed boundary, forced William to make a choice he had resisted for years. Private royal access could no longer operate on trust alone. Harry had entered under an informal family arrangement that depended more on personal understanding than written procedure. For years, visits had been coordinated quietly because William feared something colder, turning a painful family estrangement into an institutional separation. In this dramatized account, a restricted residential section meant a protected area used for private family life, rather than public ceremonies or guest access. The distinction mattered because trust, not rank, had carried the arrangement. Then Harry changed direction. He moved away from the agreed family area and continued toward the residential section, even after being told that the visit did not include it. A security officer stepped across the pathway without touching him. Harry stopped. His frustration rose. He demanded to know when he had started needing permission from his own brother to walk through places tied to his family history. The officer repeated the boundary, and the Duke heard humiliation where the staff member intended procedure. William learned about the confrontation afterward through a documented fictional security account. What disturbed him was not simply that Harry had pushed against the limit. The prince discovered that the security team had hesitated because no one was certain how firmly they could enforce a boundary when the person crossing it was the king's son. That uncertainty transformed an emotional problem into an operational one. William could tolerate anger. He could not tolerate rules that became unclear when family feelings entered the room. Harry remembered the same afternoon differently. In his mind, he had been treated like an outsider before anyone formally told him the rules had changed. He saw the interruption as proof that distance had hardened around him. William saw Harry's reaction as proof that informal expectations were no longer enough. Both men left feeling wronged, and neither spoke honestly while the resentment was fresh. William finally acted in silence. Rather than confronting Harry that day, he ordered a private access review, an internal assessment of who could enter family-controlled spaces and under whose authority. The review reached his desk with one conclusion: ambiguity had to end. Once William signed it, the pathway dispute stopped being memory and became policy. The next meeting would force two brothers to say aloud what years of silence had concealed. Harry returns before leaving the estate, and this time there is no carefully controlled conversation. No aides remain in the room. No official language protects either brother. Harry wants one answer. Why should Archie and Lilibet carry the consequences of a feud they did not create? William refuses the premise. He insists the restriction is not punishment. It is a boundary. That distinction only makes Harry angrier, because to him, a boundary imposed by family feels exactly like rejection. Harry stands across from William and refuses to sit down. The prince explains that the order concerns access procedures, not family status, inheritance, titles, or invitations to future gatherings. Access procedures simply mean the rules deciding when and how someone may enter protected private areas. That distinction matters because Harry is still the king's son, and his children remain part of the wider family. Yet none of those explanations reach him. He has already heard the names Archie and Lilibet attached to a restriction, and that is enough to make the argument deeply personal. Harry finally says the words William knew were coming. "Whatever you think of me, leave my children out of it." The future king does not raise his voice. He answers that the same access rules must apply to Harry's entire household. Otherwise, the policy immediately becomes meaningless. The Duke fires back that William has taken a dispute between brothers and transformed it into institutional exclusion. William rejects that completely. He says Harry keeps treating private access as an inherited entitlement, when, in reality, responsibility for those spaces now rests with the people living and working inside them. Harry changes direction and asks the question with the most dangerous emotional weight. Did Charles approve this? William pauses. In a documented fictional account of the exchange, he tells his brother that the king knew an access review was underway, but the final decision belonged to him. Charles had not ordered the restriction. William had chosen it. The admission lands harder, because there is suddenly no institution left for Harry to blame. His brother made the call. William then reveals something Harry did not know. He had delayed signing the restriction once before, hoping another direct conversation might make it unnecessary. The prince had wanted one final chance to preserve the informal arrangement. Harry hears that confession without softening. To him, the delay only proves William had been considering the decision far longer than he admitted. Harry reaches for his visitor credential and places it sharply on the table. He says he will not remain somewhere his family has to be cleared before entering. Then, he walks away again. But William stays where he is, because the argument has reached a harder truth. Their fight may sound like wounded brotherhood, yet sentiment does not decide who controls a royal residence, and William's authority is stronger than Harry realizes. Harry's anger rests on history. William's decision rests on responsibility. The distinction becomes decisive once the private access arrangement is examined. This is not about erasing Harry from the family tree or denying his royal birth. It is about who accepts responsibility when private family areas become security-sensitive spaces. William knows every exception eventually becomes somebody's responsibility, and he has reached the point where he will no longer leave that responsibility undefined. William sits with Catherine after midnight, the argument with Harry still hanging over him. The prince rereads the final access provision and pauses at the line covering his brother's household. Private family-controlled grounds, in this dramatized scenario, are protected residential areas governed differently from public royal properties or ceremonial venues. That difference matters because William is not only thinking about himself. He is responsible for Catherine, George, Charlotte, Louis, their household staff, and the security planning surrounding their private lives. Catherine watches him hesitate before asking the question he has been avoiding. Is there any way to protect the boundary without making Harry believe Archie and Lilibet have been rejected? William sets the pen down. He admits that the wording troubles him, but the prince argues that keeping an exception simply because everyone fears Harry's reaction would destroy the rule before it begins. Catherine understands the logic, yet she also understands the emotional cost. She reminds him that children will remember belonging long after adults forget procedure. A senior household officer later gives William the detail that hardens his resolve. In a documented fictional briefing, the officer explains that the old informal arrangement created uncertainty whenever Harry arrived without an exact movement schedule. A movement schedule simply means the agreed plan showing where a visitor may go and when. Staff were left guessing whether family status overruled security boundaries, and William sees that uncertainty as unacceptable. He will not ask officers to choose between protocol and blood. William makes one final change before approving the restriction. Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet are not barred from family gatherings, nor are they erased from future invitations. What ends is unsupervised or discretionary access to certain private grounds without prior arrangement. Catherine hears the distinction and knows it is important. She also knows Harry may hear none of it once anger takes over. William signs because he believes he has contained the damage. But beyond that room, the decision is already becoming something larger than policy. Once Harry tells Meghan what happened, the clean language of access and responsibility will collide with something far more dangerous: humiliation, hurt, and the fear that one branch of the family has been pushed outside the gate. Harry's fury does not disappear once the royal gates fall behind him. It changes shape. Anger becomes humiliation. Humiliation becomes protectiveness, and protectiveness becomes a decision of his own. By the time he speaks with Meghan, the issue is no longer simply whether he may cross a particular boundary. The question consuming him is whether his children will grow up knowing that places tied to their family history now require permission from the uncle they barely know. Harry explains the restriction to Meghan privately, forcing himself to separate what was actually decided from what it felt like. Scheduled family invitations are still possible, but informal access to certain protected areas has ended. A scheduled family invitation simply means a visit agreed in advance, with clear permission and security arrangements. Meghan understands the difference immediately. She also understands the emotional consequence. Archie and Lilibet will now experience those royal spaces differently from William's children, and she knows Harry will struggle to accept that distinction without feeling diminished. Harry removes his jacket and drops it over a chair before admitting what is really tearing at him. It is not the security language. It is not even the requirement for advance approval. It is seeing Archie and Lilibet named inside the restriction. Meghan listens without interrupting, then urges him not to answer publicly while angry. She warns that another public war could turn a painful boundary into something permanent, and Harry knows she is right, even as every instinct tells him to fight back. Harry considers canceling a future family visit altogether. In a documented fictional private conversation, he tells Meghan he will not walk his children through a gate if the experience makes them feel inspected rather than welcomed. She pushes back gently, asking whether refusing every invitation would protect them or simply deepen the distance. The question lands because neither of them wants Archie and Lilibet to inherit a feud they did not create. Charles then reaches out directly. The king does not call to overturn William's decision, and Harry realizes that almost immediately. Instead, his father tells him that access rules do not decide whether he remains his son, and they do not decide whether Archie and Lilibet remain his grandchildren. Harry softens when Charles speaks about the children, but he refuses the monarch's suggestion that everyone meet immediately. The wound is too fresh. Days pass before another message arrives. This one does not come through palace staff, lawyers, or secretaries. William sends it himself. For the first time since the gate closed, the next move will not come from an office or security desk. It will come from one brother to another. The turning point does not arrive in a grand room or through a formal announcement. It arrives in a private conversation stripped of everything royal. William contacts Harry directly and asks for 20 minutes. No aides, no statements, no one speaking for either of them. Harry agrees, but he does not arrive seeking reconciliation. He wants William to understand what the restriction felt like. William, equally determined, wants Harry to understand why he signed it. For once, neither man can hide behind the institution. William makes the purpose clear before the conversation goes any further. He says he is not asking Harry to apologize, withdraw his objections, or pretend the decision caused no pain. The prince simply wants them to speak without intermediaries, meaning aides, advisors, or officials who normally carry messages between two people. That matters because every previous exchange had been reduced to wording, procedure, and competing versions of what each brother meant. Harry agrees to continue only because this time he knows no one else will interpret his anger for him. Harry goes straight to the wound he has been carrying. He tells William that seeing Archie and Lilibet named inside an access restriction made him feel as though their father's family was slowly withdrawing from his children. The Duke does not shout. That restraint makes the words heavier. William listens, then admits he should have separated the children's language more carefully. He accepts that the wording made the measure feel personal, but he refuses to reverse the boundary itself. Harry finally gives something back. In a documented fictional account of their private conversation, he concedes that walking toward the restricted residential area during the earlier visit put security staff in an impossible position. He insists he was not trying to challenge William publicly or force his way anywhere. The prince accepts that distinction, but says intention cannot be the only rule when staff need clear authority. For the first time, Harry hears responsibility without immediately translating it as rejection. William then makes his own admission. He says he should have confronted the pathway incident directly, instead of letting frustration sit between them until resentment hardened into policy. Harry absorbs that quietly. Neither brother suddenly forgives everything, but the argument changes. They agree on one modification. Unrestricted access will not return, yet future family visits will follow a clear process that does not name Archie and Lilibet as though they themselves are the problem. The compromise is narrow, but it is real. William keeps the boundary. Harry protects his children's dignity. Yet before either brother can control the meaning of what happened, the outside world catches only the first explosive chapter. Inside the room, they have found a sliver of common ground. Outside it, Britain wakes to a headline declaring royal exile. By morning, one image dominates the story. Harry leaving the royal estate with a rigid expression, while William remains behind. The nuance vanishes almost instantly. The restriction becomes a ban. The disagreement becomes exile. The private conversation that later softened the terms is invisible. Once the brothers' conflict enters the public bloodstream, millions begin debating not merely who was right, but what family membership means when one brother is also responsible for protecting the crown's future. Harry becomes the center of a storm he never publicly confirms. News coverage compresses a limited access decision into something far more dramatic, portraying the dispute as another symbolic break between the brothers. Palace staff refuse to argue with that emotional framing and privately stress that scheduled family contact still exists. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution rather than one individual, now faces a familiar danger. A complicated private decision has been reduced to one brutal public message. Catherine sees the fictional morning front page over breakfast. Across it runs the headline, "Royal Gates Closed," above an image of Harry's vehicle leaving Windsor. The Princess of Wales understands immediately why the wording is dangerous. She worries that Archie and Lilibet could one day find that headline online and believe they were personally rejected. William reads the same coverage later, and the prince realizes the story has become something neither brother actually agreed to. Crowds begin gathering near the public approach outside Windsor. Some voices defend William's right to secure the private spaces surrounding his family. Others argue that Harry's children should never feel the consequences of an adult feud. The debate grows because both positions touch something deeply human. One side sees responsibility, while the other sees exclusion. Yet the loudest version of the story is also the simplest, and simplicity is exactly what this dispute never had. Harry is urged by advisors to respond publicly, but he refuses. In a documented fictional account of those discussions, he says another statement would only force William to answer, turning a private wound into another public battle. The Duke chooses silence. William makes the same choice inside the household, telling staff that Harry has not been expelled from the family, and that no one should celebrate the restriction as a victory. That mutual silence changes the direction of everything. Neither brother wins the headlines, but neither feeds them either. The world expects another royal war. Instead, William and Harry are moving toward one final choice that will decide what the closed gate truly means. Not reunion, not surrender, but a harder, more durable form of peace. There is no dramatic reversal. William does not tear up the restriction, and Harry does not suddenly decide it never mattered. The private royal grounds remain subject to advance arrangements. That boundary survives. But something else changes. The brothers finally separate two things they had allowed to become dangerously tangled: access and belonging. Harry accepts that private royal space can have rules without those rules defining his children's worth. William accepts that enforcing a boundary does not excuse ignoring the emotional wound created by how it was delivered. Harry receives the revised wording and reads it twice. He does not tear it up. He does not fire back with another angry message. Instead, he places it down and sits with what it means. The family arrangement now makes one thing clear. Archie and Lilibet may still attend agreed private family gatherings with their parents, even though automatic discretionary access to certain protected grounds is over. Discretionary access simply means entering without a separately arranged family visit. The rule remains, but the children are no longer framed as the problem. William speaks to Catherine later and admits something harder than victory. He does not regret creating the boundary. He regrets allowing resentment to shape the way he delivered it. The prince knows future leadership will sometimes demand decisions his brother hates. Yet he also understands that power without direct communication can turn necessary limits into unnecessary cruelty. Catherine hears the change in him. He is not celebrating control. He is accepting its cost. Harry reaches his own verdict in silence. According to a documented fictional account of the final family exchange, he decides he will not use Archie and Lilibet's relationship with Charles or the wider family as leverage against William. The Duke remains wounded, but he refuses to make his children inherit every grievance he carries. Charles, meanwhile, is quietly relieved that neither son has forced him to choose one branch of his family over the other. The king understands that the old brotherhood has not returned, but the worst outcome has been avoided. The gate stays controlled. The family is not erased. William keeps responsibility for the boundary, Harry keeps his dignity, and both men protect the children's place inside a family divided by history. Their childhood freedom is gone. What remains is adulthood, limits, and a colder but clearer peace. That choice becomes the final legacy. Harry stormed out because he believed William had closed the door on his family. In the end, the door remained controlled, but neither brother allowed it to become the wall that separated the next generation. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.